They poured a drink on a waitress. It was a cruel joke, a moment of laughter for four arrogant men. But every action has a consequence, and they are about to meet hers. If you're new here, subscribe and comment your location. Now let's begin. The laughter in the diner was loud and mean. It came from the booth by the window where four young men sat. Their names were Mark, James, David, and Paul. They wore expensive watches and shiny shoes. They thought they owned the world. Their waitress was a woman named Alina. She was quiet and kind. She had soft eyes and a gentle way of moving. She was bringing them their fourth round of burgers and fries. Finally, Mark snapped, looking at his gold watch. "What took you so long? My ice melted." "I'm so sorry," Alina said softly, her hands full of heavy plates. "The kitchen is busy." "Sorry isn't good enough," James said, a nasty smile on his face. He looked at his friends. They all had the same cruel look in their eyes. Alina started putting the plates down, her hands shaking a little. As she reached to set the last plate in front of Paul, Mark nudged James's arm. James held up his large, full glass of Coca-Cola. It was dark and fizzy with ice cubes. "Here," James said, "let me help you cool down." Before Alina could move, he tipped the glass. The cold, brown liquid poured right over her head. It splashed on her face, soaked into her blonde hair, and dripped down her neck and onto her white uniform. The ice cubes hit her shoulders and fell to the floor with a clatter. Alina gasped. She froze, her eyes wide with shock and shame. The sticky soda ran into her eyes and down her cheeks like tears. The four young men burst into loud laughter. They slapped the table. "Look at her," David howled. "She's a mess." "Maybe now she'll be faster," Paul said, still laughing. Alina stood there, dripping. Everyone in the diner was staring. Some people looked away, ashamed for her. Others just watched. No one moved to help. The young men were too rich, too loud, too scary. Alina's lower lip trembled. She turned and walked quickly toward the back of the diner, leaving wet footprints on the floor. The laughter followed her. In the small break room, Alina leaned against the wall. She tried to wipe the sticky soda from her face with a paper towel, but it just smeared. She was shaking. She wasn't crying from the soda. She was crying from the humiliation. It was so public, so mean, for no reason at all. She thought of her husband, Leo. He would be home soon. He hated seeing her upset. He was a calm man, a quiet man who worked late in the city. He always told her she didn't have to work at the diner, but she liked it. She liked the simple routine, until days like this. She pulled her phone out of her pocket. Her fingers left sticky marks on the screen. She sent him one text message, just 3 words. "I need you." She didn't call. She never called him at work, but a text he would see it. Across the city, in a quiet, expensive office that looked out over the river, a phone buzzed on a polished wooden desk. The man behind the desk was reading a report. His name was Leo. He was in his 40s, with strong hands and dark hair that was turning gray at the sides. His face was serious, but not unkind. He wore a simple, well-made suit. He picked up his personal phone. He only had a few contacts on it. One was for his wife, Alina. When he saw her message, his whole body went still. The calm, quiet feeling in the room disappeared. It was replaced by something cold, something dangerous. Leo did not shout. He did not get up quickly. He put the phone down slowly. He looked out the window for a moment, his jaw tight. Then he pressed a button on his desk. A door opened immediately. A big man in a dark suit walked in. His name was Victor. "Sir," Victor said. "Get the car," Leo said, his voice low and even. "Alina is at the diner. She needs me." Victor did not ask any questions. He saw the look in Leo's eyes. It was a look Victor had seen only a few times before. It meant that the quiet world they had built was about to crack. He nodded once and left the room. Leo stood up. He didn't grab his coat. He just walked out, his steps firm and heavy on the floor. Behind him on the wall of his office was a simple painting. It was a lion painted in dark red strokes. It was his symbol. In this city, people who knew things whispered about the red lion. They spoke in low voices about the man you never saw, the man who owned the streets, the docks, and the silence. They said when the lion was calm, the city was calm. And when the lion was angry, the city bled. Back at the diner, the 4 young men were still laughing. They had ordered more Cokes just to joke about it. "Do you think she's crying in the back?" Mark asked, grinning. "Who cares?" James said. "She's just a waitress." They paid their bill, leaving a single dollar tip on the messy, wet table. They stood up to leave, still joking and pushing each other. As they walked toward the door, it opened from the outside. A man walked in. He was not a tall man, but he seemed to fill the doorway. He wore a dark suit without a tie. His eyes scanned the diner, fast and sharp. They passed over the 4 young men without seeing them. They looked for only one person. He saw the sticky, wet footprints on the floor. He saw the empty booth with the spilled soda and the single dollar bill. His gaze followed the footprints toward the back of the diner. And then Alina came out from the break room. She had tried to clean up, but her hair was still wet and dark in places. Her uniform had a large, damp stain on the front. Her eyes were red. When she saw her husband, her face crumpled in relief and shame. Leo's heart felt like it was being squeezed. He walked toward her. The whole diner was silent now. They could feel it. Something was wrong. The 4 young men paused near the door, curious. They saw the serious-looking man go to the crying waitress. "Leo," Alina whispered. He reached her. He didn't hug her right away. He gently touched her cheek, wiping away a drop of soda with his thumb. His touch was soft, but his hand was shaking with anger. "What happened, my love?" he asked, his voice so quiet only she could hear it. Alina shook her head. She didn't want to make trouble. It was nothing, an accident. Some customers, they were just joking. Leo looked over her shoulder. He saw the young men by the door, watching with smirks. He saw the wet table they had just left. He saw the dollar bill. He understood everything. He kissed Alina's forehead. "Go with Victor," he said softly. "He's outside in the car. Go home. I'll be there soon." Alina wanted to argue, but the look in his eyes told her not to. She nodded and walked toward the door. Victor, the big man, was now standing just outside. He held the door open for her, his face like stone. The 4 young men had to step aside to let her pass. They looked at Victor's size and his cold eyes, and their smirks faded a little. Leo watched his wife leave. Then he turned around. He walked slowly to the center of the diner. He looked at the 4 young men. His face was calm, empty, but his eyes were like black ice. "You," he said. His voice was not loud, but it cut through the silence like a knife. "You were at that table." Mark, the leader, puffed out his chest. "So what? We paid, we left a tip." Leo ignored him. He looked at each of them, one by one. He was memorizing their faces. "Who," Leo asked, his words slow and clear, "poured the drink on her?" The friends looked at each other. James, feeling brave, stepped forward. "I did. It was just a joke, old man. She was too slow. We taught her a lesson." Leo's eyes locked onto James. For a second, James felt a chill go down his spine. This was not the look of a sad husband. This was the look of a predator. "A lesson," Leo repeated, nodding slowly. "I see." He took one step closer. The young men took a step back, bumping into the door. "What's your name?" Leo asked James. James Walcott. My father is Richard Walcott. You know, from Walcott Investments," James said, trying to sound strong. He used his father's name like a shield. Leo did not react to the name. "James Walcott," he said, as if tasting the words. "And your friends?" "Mark, David, Paul," James said, pointing. "Who are you supposed to be? Her daddy?" A very faint, cold smile touched Leo's lips. It was more terrifying than a frown. "I am her husband." He looked at them for one more second. Then he turned and walked toward the diner counter. He took a napkin from a holder. He took a pen from his pocket. He wrote something on the napkin. He walked back to the young men and held it out. It was a phone number. "Call your fathers," Leo said, his voice deadly quiet. "Tell them what you did today. Tell them you poured Coca-Cola on Alina. Then tell them that Leo is waiting for their call. They have 1 hour." Mark laughed, a nervous sound. "Leo, who's Leo? You're crazy, man, we're leaving." They pushed open the door and walked out into the afternoon sun, laughing again, but it was weaker now. They got into their shiny sports car and drove away, speeding down the street. Leo watched them go. He pulled out his own phone. He made a call. A voice answered on the first ring. "Yes, sir." "4 boys," Leo said, his eyes still on the street. "Mark, James, David, and Paul, they just left the Royal Diner in a blue sports car. I don't know the plate. Find them. Follow them. Do not touch them, just watch. I want to know where they live. I want to know who their families are. Everything." "Understood, sir." Leo put the phone away. He looked at the diner owner, who was peeking from the kitchen. Leo walked over and placed 5 $100 bills on the counter. "For the mess," Leo said, "and for your silence." The owner just nodded quickly, his face pale. Leo left the diner. The black car was gone, already taking Alina home. Another car, just as dark, pulled up to the curb. Leo got in the back seat. "To the office," he said. In their speeding car, the 4 friends were trying to feel brave again. "Did you see his face?" Paul giggled. "He looked so serious." "Tell your fathers Leo is waiting," James said, imitating Leo's quiet voice. "What a loser. He probably works at a gas station." "My dad will laugh when I tell him," Mark said, but he didn't sound sure. He kept seeing the man's eyes. "Forget it," David said. "Let's go to my place. We can use the pool." They drove to David's big house in the nicest part of the city. They swam, they played loud music, they ordered pizza. They tried to forget the quiet man in the diner. But Mark couldn't forget. After an hour, he felt a strange worry in his stomach. He went inside to the living room, away from the noise. He took out his phone. He looked at the napkin he had crumpled in his pocket. The phone number was still there. Something told him to call, just to prove the man was nobody. He dialed the number. It rang once. "Yes," it was the man's voice, Leo. Mark's throat felt dry. This is Mark from the diner." "You have 52 minutes left," Leo said calmly. "Did you call your father?" "Listen, mister," Mark said, trying to sound tough. "We're sorry about your wife, okay? It was a dumb joke. We'll send her some flowers or something. Let's just forget it." There was a long silence on the other end. Mark could almost feel the cold coming through the phone. 51 minutes, Leo said. Then the call ended. Mark stared at his phone. A chill ran through his whole body. He walked back outside to the pool. His friends were laughing. "Who was that?" James asked. "It was him," Mark said, his voice quiet. "The husband." James rolled his eyes. "And what did he say?" "He said we have 51 minutes left." James laughed. "He's crazy, forget him." But Mark couldn't. He walked to the edge of the pool and sat down. He thought about calling his dad. His father, Robert, was a hard man. He built a construction business from nothing. He was not a kind man. Mark was more scared of his father's anger than of some stranger named Leo. But the stranger's voice, it was so sure. At that moment, in a downtown office building, Robert Miller was finishing a meeting. His phone rang. It was his head of security, Tony. "Sir," Tony said, his voice tense, "we have a problem." "What problem?" Robert asked. "There are 2 black SUVs parked outside your house. They've been there for 30 minutes. Men inside just watching. The same 2 cars are outside the Walcott residence, the Peterson house, and the Greer apartment building." Robert felt a knot form in his stomach. "Who are they?" "I don't know, sir. The cars are clean. The men don't move. I tried to send one of our guys to ask them to leave. They showed him a badge, not a police badge, a different badge. It had a symbol on it." "What symbol?" Robert asked, his heart starting to beat faster. "A red lion, sir." Robert Miller's blood went cold. He had lived in this city for 50 years. He had heard the whispers. The red lion was not a story. He was real. And he was the king of the city's darkest shadows. If the lion's men were at his house, it meant his family had done something very, very stupid. "Find my son," Robert said, his voice shaking. "Find Mark now." Back at the pool, Mark's phone rang. It was his father. He answered, his hand trembling. "Mark," his father shouted, "what did you do?" "Dad, What are you talking about? Did you and your friends do something to a woman today? A waitress. Mark's stomach dropped. It was just a joke, Dad. We poured a Coke on a waitress. It was nothing. Nothing. Robert Miller's voice was a mix of fury and pure fear. You idiot. Do you know who her husband is? Some guy named Leo, Mark said weakly. His name is Leo Andolini, his father roared. They call him the Red Lion. He owns this city. He could have us all buried and no one would ever find the bodies. Mark felt the world tilt. The phone almost slipped from his wet hand. He looked at his friends who were now watching him, their smiles gone. He gave us an hour, Mark whispered into the phone. He said to call you. He's waiting for your call. An hour, Robert sounded desperate. When did the hour start? I don't know, maybe an hour and a half ago. Oh, God. The line was silent for a moment. Stay where you are, do not move, do not talk to anyone, I'm calling the others. The call ended. Mark looked at his three friends. Their faces were white. What's going on? David asked. My dad, Mark said, his voice hollow. He knows the husband. He said his name is Leo Andolini, the Red Lion. James, who had poured the Coke, felt his legs give way. He sat down hard on the concrete. The Red Lion, that's a Mafia story, a ghost story. He's not a ghost, Mark said, and my dad is terrified. Within 10 minutes, all their fathers were on a frantic group call. Robert Miller, Mark's father. Richard Walcott, James's father. Stephen Peterson, David's father. Charles Greer, Paul's father. They were all powerful, wealthy men, but now they sounded like scared boys. We have to call him, Richard Walcott said. We have to apologize, we have to offer money, anything. Do you have the number he gave the boys? Charles Greer asked. Yes, Robert said. I'm calling him now, everyone be quiet. Robert put the call on speaker. He dialed the number from the napkin. It rang. Yes, the voice was calm, cold. Mr. Andolini, Robert said, trying to sound respectful. This is Robert Miller. My son Mark is one of the boys from the diner. We have just learned of their terrible behavior. On behalf of all the families, I want to offer our deepest, most sincere apologies. We are horrified. We would like to meet with you. We will of course pay for any distress caused to your wife. Name the amount. We will also ensure the boys are severely punished. There was a long pause. They could hear the quiet breathing on the other end. An apology, Leo said. His voice was soft, but it scared them more than a shout. You think this is about an apology? You think this is about money? We want to make it right, Robert said. Your son poured a sticky, cold drink on my wife's head in front of a room full of people, Leo said, each word like a drop of ice. He laughed. They all laughed. They called it a lesson. They left her standing there, humiliated. You cannot buy away that image. You cannot punish them enough. Then what do you want? Richard Walcott burst out. What will it take? I want a lesson, Leo said. A real one they will never forget, one you will never forget. What kind of lesson? Stephen Peterson asked, dreading the answer. You will bring your sons to a place I choose, Leo said. Tonight, at midnight, you will come alone, no security, no police. If I see one extra car, one extra person, the deal is off. And you do not want the deal to be off. And then what? Charles Greer asked, his voice trembling. Then, Leo said, they will learn what happens when you touch what is mine. Midnight, the old sugar refinery on the West Docks, Warehouse 7. Come dressed for a mess. The call ended. The four fathers looked at each other in horror. The old sugar refinery. It was a dirty, abandoned place. A place where no one would hear you scream. We can't go, Charles whispered. It's a trap, he'll kill them. If we don't go, he'll kill all of us, Robert said, his head in his hands. He'll destroy our businesses, our homes, our lives. This is the lion. He doesn't make empty threats. What does he mean, dressed for a mess? Stephen asked, confused. Nobody had an answer. They had no choice. They called their sons and told them to come home immediately. They told them to put on old clothes, clothes they could ruin. At home in their beautiful, safe apartment, Alina was in a warm bath. Leo had come home earlier. He had held her for a long time, not saying anything. He made her tea. He was so gentle, but she could feel the storm inside him. It was like a vibration under his calm skin. "What are you going to do, Leo?" she asked him softly as he sat on the edge of the bathtub, stroking her hair. "What needs to be done, my heart?" he said. "They will not laugh at you again. No one will." "Please," she whispered, her eyes worried. Don't go too far." He kissed her forehead. "I will only go as far as they did, but I will make sure they feel it." He left her to rest. In his study, he made more phone calls. He spoke to Victor. "Is everything ready at the refinery?" "Yes, sir, just as you asked." "Good." Midnight was cold and dark. The west docks were silent, except for the sound of water lapping against the old wooden piers. The sugar refinery was a giant, black shape against the night sky. Warehouse 7 had a single, dim light over a rusty door. 4 luxury cars drove up, one after the other. They parked. The doors opened. The 4 fathers got out, followed by their sons. The boys looked young and scared now. They wore jeans and sweatshirts. They didn't look like rich bullies anymore. They looked like kids who knew they were in big trouble. The big door of the warehouse creaked open. Victor stood there, silhouetted by a harsh light from inside. He said nothing. He just jerked his head, telling them to come in. They walked inside. The warehouse was huge and empty, except for the middle. There, under a single bright hanging light, stood Leo. He was alone. He had changed into black pants and a simple black sweater. He looked at them as they filed in. In the center of the lit area were 4 plain wooden chairs, and behind them, towering almost to the ceiling, were 4 huge, rusty metal tanks. They were old syrup tanks from the refinery. Thick pipes came down from them, each ending in a large showerhead-like nozzle. The nozzles were pointed directly at the chairs. "Sit," Leo said, pointing to the chairs. The boys looked at their fathers. The fathers, pale and sweating, nodded. The boys slowly sat down on the chairs. Leo walked forward. He stopped in front of James, the one who had poured the Coke. "James," Leo said, "you said you were teaching my wife a lesson for being slow. Do you remember?" James nodded, too afraid to speak. "Lessons are important," Leo said. He walked to the side of the room. There was a simple metal control box with 4 large levers. Each lever had a name written on tape above it: Mark, James, David, Paul. "You taught her with 1 glass," Leo said. "I will teach you with what's in those tanks." He pointed up at the giant containers. "They are filled with liquid sugar, dark, sticky, and very, very cold. It is the raw syrup that makes Coca-Cola. It is 10,000 times what you used on her." The boys stared up at the tanks in terror. "Please," Richard Walcott begged, stepping forward. "Mr. Andolini, please, he's just a boy. Will do anything. Take my business, take my house." Leo looked at him. "If you interrupt again, Richard, you will join your son in the chair. Do you understand?" Richard closed his mouth and stepped back, tears in his eyes. Leo walked back to the control box. He looked at the 4 fathers. "You built fortunes. You gave your sons everything except respect. You did not teach them that the waitress, the cleaner, the driver, they are people. Tonight, you will learn that lesson with them." He put his hand on the first lever, the one marked James. "You poured the drink," Leo said, looking at James. "So you go first, a lesson for speed." He pulled the lever. A loud clunk echoed in the warehouse. Then a hissing, gurgling sound came from the pipes above James's chair. James looked up, his eyes wide with panic. A torrent of thick, dark brown syrup exploded from the nozzle. It was a powerful, continuous stream. It hit James on the top of his head with a loud, wet slap. "Aagh!" he screamed. The syrup was ice cold. It was heavy. It soaked his hair in a second, flooding over his face, into his mouth, his nose, his eyes. It poured over his shoulders, drenching his sweatshirt, running down his arms and legs. The chair was instantly covered. A sticky, sweet-smelling puddle spread around his feet. He coughed and spluttered, trying to wipe his eyes, but his hands were already covered in the goo. He couldn't see. He couldn't breathe. He just sat there, gasping and crying as the endless stream of syrup drowned him. After 30 seconds, Leo pushed the lever back up. The stream stopped. James sat there, dripping and shaking, covered from head to toe in the sticky mess. He was sobbing. Leo moved to the next lever. Mark. You laughed, Leo said. You were the leader, you encouraged it. He pulled the lever. The same thing happened to Mark. The cold, thick syrup crashed down on him. He screamed. He tried to get up from the chair, but Victor was suddenly there, a strong hand on his shoulder, forcing him to stay seated. Mark twisted and cried as the syrup coated him. Then David, then Paul. One by one, they were punished. The warehouse filled with the sound of crying, coughing, and the sweet, sickly smell of sugar. The fathers watched, horrified, some cried. Some turned away, but they all watched. They had to. When it was done, all 4 boys sat on their chairs, unrecognizable. They were shivering, covered in a hardening, sticky shell of brown syrup. They were humiliated, terrified, and completely broken. Leo walked to the middle of the room again. He looked at the fathers. Now you understand, he said quietly. This is the mess. This is the feeling. This is what you taught your sons to do to another human being for fun. He walked over to Robert Miller. Take them home. Clean them up. The syrup will take days to wash out completely. Their hair, their skin, they will smell it for a week. They will feel sticky long after that. Every time they feel it, they will remember. Every time they smell something sweet, they will remember. He looked at each father. If any of you, or any of them, ever speaks of this night, or ever looks at my wife again, or even thinks of causing someone else this kind of humiliation, the next visit will not be with syrup. Do you believe me? They all nodded quickly, their faces white with fear. Good, get out. The fathers rushed forward. They helped their sticky, crying sons to their feet. They half carried, half dragged them out of the warehouse, leaving trails of syrup on the dirty floor. Leo and Victor were left alone. Victor looked at the mess. Do you think they learned, boss? Leo watched the last car drive away into the night. They learned fear. That is the first step to learning respect. He took out his phone. He called home. Elena answered on the first ring. Leo, are you okay? I'm okay, my love, it's over. They won't bother you again. What did you do? She asked, her voice full of worry. I gave them a lesson they could taste, he said softly. Go to sleep, I'll be home soon. He ended the call. He looked at the empty, sticky chairs. Justice was not always pretty. It was sometimes dark and sticky and cold. But for his Elena, for her tears, it was the only kind that would work. Clean this up, he said to Victor. Make it disappear. Then Leo and Eleni, the Red Lion, walked out of the warehouse and into the night, going home to his wife. The black car cut through the silent city streets. Inside, Leo leaned his head back against the seat. He felt tired, not from the night's work, but from the anger that had been burning inside him. He closed his eyes and saw Elena's face, dripping with soda, her eyes full of shame. The cold fire in his chest began to cool, replaced by a deep need to just be home, to see her safe and know it was over. At the apartment, Victor stopped the car. All quiet, sir, no watchers. Good, go home. Thank you, Victor. Leo entered the building. It was a normal, nice building. No one here knew who he was. To them, he was just Leo, the quiet man in 12B who had a lovely wife. He preferred it that way. He opened the door to his home. The lights were low. The living room was warm and clean, a world away from the cold, sticky refinery. Elena was on the sofa. She wasn't sleeping. She was wrapped in a blanket, waiting. When she saw him, she stood up. He didn't say a word. He walked to her and pulled her into his arms. He held her tightly, burying his face in her clean, sweet-smelling hair. She held him back just as tight. It's done, he whispered into her hair. Are you all right? She asked, pulling back to look at his face. I am now, he said, and he meant it. Seeing her here and safe was the only thing that could calm the storm. They won't come near you again. They won't even look at you. What did you do, Leo? Her voice was soft, but she needed to know. He led her to the sofa and sat down, holding her hands. He told her, not every detail, but enough. The warehouse, the tanks, the syrup. I didn't hurt them, he said. Not in the way people think of hurting. I gave them back their own joke. I made them feel it. 1,000 times over. So they will always remember the feeling when they think about being cruel. Elena was quiet for a moment. She thought of the cold, sticky shock. She thought of the laughter. Then she thought of 4 spoiled boys sitting in that same horror. A part of her, the part that had trembled in the diner break room, felt a small slice of justice. And their fathers, she asked. They watched, Leo said, his voice flat. They had to learn the lesson too, that their money cannot protect their children from consequences, not from me. Elena nodded slowly. She knew her husband's world. She had chosen to love him despite it, because she saw the man beneath the legend, the man who brought her coffee in bed, who remembered her favorite flowers, whose eyes were only ever gentle when they looked at her. That man had a dark side, but that dark side was forged to protect what he loved. I don't want this life for you, she said, a tear slipping down her cheek. I don't want you to have to be the lion because of me. He wiped her tear away. Elena, listen to me. The lion exists so that I can come home to you, so that no one can put that look in your eyes. That is the only reason any of it matters. You are my peace. They threatened my peace. They learned the price. He stood up and went to the window, looking out at the sleeping city. Tomorrow, the city will hear whispers. The fathers will tell their close friends in secret what happened. The story will spread in the right circles, and they will all remember. The waitress, the cleaner, the driver, they will be safer because of tonight. Because the red lion showed that even the smallest person under his protection is untouchable. He turned back to her. That is the real lesson. The next week passed quietly. Elena did not go back to the diner. Leo asked her not to. He said, "Please, for my heart, let me take care of you." She agreed. She found a job at a small library, a place of quiet and order. She liked it. In the world of wealth and power, a shockwave had rolled through. The story of the syrup at the refinery was told in hushed tones in private clubs and boardrooms. No one dared speak the name Andolini or Red Lion aloud. They just said, "You heard about the Walcott boy?" or "the Miller kid." And everyone would nod, their faces serious. The lesson was learned. One afternoon, a package was delivered to Leo's office. It was a simple envelope. Inside were 4 letters handwritten, apologies from Mark, James, David, and Paul. They were full of fear and shame. There was also a letter from the 4 fathers. It contained a deed. It was the ownership papers for the Royal Diner, signed over to a shell company Leo owned. It was a gift, a peace offering. Leo looked at the deed. He showed it to Elena that evening. "They gave you the diner?" she asked, surprised. "They are trying to buy safety. To show they understand their place. What will you do with it?" He smiled a small smile. "I think we'll close it, renovate it, reopen it with better pay for the staff. A place where no waitress will ever be treated like that again. We'll call it Elena." She hugged him then, laughing a little through tears. "You're a good man, Leo and Eleni." "Only for you," he whispered back. "Only because of you." A month later, the city moved on. But in certain houses, the lesson lingered. Mark Miller could not drink soda anymore. The sound of fizz made him feel sick. He had nightmares about drowning in sweetness. James Walcott cut his hair short, trying to get rid of the last sticky feeling. He volunteered at a soup kitchen, quietly, without telling his friends. David Peterson and Paul Greer both asked their fathers for jobs at the bottom of the family businesses. They wanted to understand the people who worked for them. The fathers, Robert, Richard, Stephen, and Charles, met for lunch. The conversation was stiff. "My son is different," Robert said finally, stirring his water. "Quiet, thinks before he speaks." "Mine too," Stephen admitted. "He asked me about the pension plan for our warehouse workers. I nearly fell out of my chair." They didn't talk about the refinery. They didn't need to. The fear of that night was a bond between them now. They had looked into the eyes of true power, and it had nothing to do with money. It had to do with consequence. One evening, Leo and Elena walked through the city park. It was a cool, clear night. She held his arm, her head on his shoulder. They looked like any other couple in love. "Are you happy, my heart?" Leo asked. She looked up at him, her face peaceful in the moonlight. "I am, are you?" He stopped walking and turned to face her. He cupped her face in his hands. Alina, you are the only thing that has ever made me happy. Before you, I was just the lion living in the dark. You brought me into the light. You are my life. He kissed her, softly and surely. In the shadows across the park, Victor leaned against a tree, watching. He saw his boss, the most feared man in the city, holding his wife like she was made of glass. Victor smiled to himself. This was why they followed him, not just out of fear, but because he knew what was worth protecting. He knew the value of one good, gentle thing in a cruel world. Later that night in their apartment, Leo stood on the balcony. The city glittered below him, a kingdom of dark and light. He could feel its pulse. He owned much of it, but the only part that truly mattered was inside, asleep in their bed. He heard the soft pad of feet. Alina came out, wrapped in her robe. She stood beside him, slipping her hand into his. "Can't sleep?" she asked. "Just thinking," he said. "About the city." "About you," he said. "About how I almost lost my temper that day, real anger, the kind that burns everything down." "But you didn't." "No, because I thought of you. I thought, what would Alina want? She would want them to learn, not to die. So they learned." "You found a better way," she said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "There is no better way, Alina. There is only your way. That is the way I choose." They stood in silence for a long time, watching the city. The red lion and his heart, the king of the shadows and the woman who was his light. The story of the Coca-Cola would become a dark legend in the city's underworld. But for Leo and Alina, it was just a bad memory that faded, replaced by quiet mornings and shared smiles. The threat was over. The lesson was taught. They were safe, they were together, and in their world that was everything. Did you think they got what they deserved? Let us know in the comments, and tell us where you're watching from. Subscribe to Storyverse for more tailies where karma comes for those who deserve it, because everyone loves a good revenge story. Don't miss the next one.